Well, good evening, everybody. I think we can get ready to start. I just want to welcome everyone again. It's really nice that you're with us and that you're committed to the Power Hour. And really, this is about you. It's about bringing a revelation to you and an understanding of the Word. Tonight, Wouter is going to be bringing the topic. Really looking forward to that. Last week was good. This week is going to be even better. But every week as we go, it gets better and better and better as God brings more revelation. So, Wouter, thank you that you're going to bring the Word, and we're really excited to hear what you're going to reveal to us about the mighty men and women of God. Just remember that you're welcome to ask questions at any time. If you have a question that you want, just raise your hand, and then we'll just see what it is, and we can go from there. Also, just remember that next week we will continue with the book of Judges, and we will have a look at some other judges, and then round off the whole presentation of the book of Judges, because we've just found so much revelation and truth in it, and I think that many of us didn't really understand what was there. You know, we always have this idea of Samson and Delilah and a few others, and that's like the sort of storybook picture that we have. But in reality, there's so much more, and there's so much depth, and there's so much revelation that God has brought to us that has really made a difference. So, Wouter, without much ado, I hand over to you. Be blessed this evening, and may God really just anoint you.
Yeah, thank you, Uncle Alvin. It's always a privilege to bring the Word of God. And it's exciting. It's exciting even in preparation. It is exciting to read the Word of God, to read new things, to recultivate things read but forgotten. And, it's great to go through the Bible, for the love of the Word. As we look tonight, we are going to look at two of the judges in the book of Judges, Gideon and Samson. And tonight I just want to encourage everyone as we share, as we release. Do not just look at the Bible as a story. I have really received so many principles and so many life lessons from reading these chapters, and that's what we want to cultivate, is a love of the Word. So let us start off with Gideon. That is the reading in Judges 6-8. He was a judge for 40 years over Israel. So let's just look at the setting quickly. And in Judges 6 verse 1, then the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of the Midianites, the children of Israel made for themselves dens, the caves and the strongholds which are in the mountains. So we are looking once again here, like we've seen a lot of times in the Old Testament, is that the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they were oppressed. They were going through a tough time. As you can read in verse 1, they had to hide themselves. They had to get away from the Midianites. It's because of Israel worship pagan gods and goddesses of the land. So once again, they were removed from worship in the true God, and they made pagan worship. So God removed his hand from them. They were in hiding. The reason they were in hiding in caves and strongholds in the mountains is because at that stage, the Midianites would look at harvest time, and as soon as harvest time came, they moved into the countryside, and they took everything that the Israelites had worked for, grown, cultivated. They just came in and they took it for themselves. The Midianites and the Amalekites would steal and destroy all their produce. You can read that in Judges 6 verse 3-4. So they were oppressed. They were going through a tough time by their own doing, as explained by an unknown prophet. Let's look at the word in Judges 6 verse 7. And it came to pass, when the children of Israel cried out to the Lord because of the Midianites, that the Lord sent a prophet to the children of Israel, who said to them, thus says the Lord God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of bondage. And I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. Also I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell, but you did not obey my voice. So here's already a first life lesson. As I read this, I'm just reminded, we all know the Israelites, God looked after them, God provided for them, God really made them felt like his people, but because of not having faith and going after other gods, basically being disobedient, God removed his hand, his good hand over them. And isn't it like our lives sometimes? You know, God provides, and then after a while of it going good, we are not focused on the presence of God, dwelling with him, and then everything goes a bit difficult. And then we return to God. So sometimes some of us, we are also like the Israelites. So, you know, just having a look there, God is always good and he always comes through for his people. So let's look at Gideon's life. There was a call to Gideon by God, and we read this in Judges 6 verse 11 to 24. Now Gideon, as I said, the Israelites were in hiding. Gideon was also in hiding. So in verse 11 we read, now an angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth tree, which was an Orpah, which belonged to Joaz the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. Remember, we said they were in hiding so that the Midianites could not come and steal what they've been working on. Verse 12, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, the Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor. Now, I think this must be quite a shock when you are busy cultivating something so that a robber, someone doesn't come in and steal, and then an angel appears to you and says, mighty man of valor. Now, as we read on, let me not skip ahead. Gideon said to him, oh my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. Then the Lord turned to him and said, go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you? So he said to him, oh my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. And the Lord said to him, surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man. Now, once again, just in your imagination, go to this place where this young man, Gideon, is busy working, busy cultivating, making a living, just something to eat, trying to hide it from the enemy. And the angel of the Lord appears to him, says to him that he's a mighty man of valor, that he will go in his might, meaning that he's a mighty man, and that he will go and he will defeat the Midianites and deliver Israel from their hand. Now, in that we can read, it says, indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh. So his clan that he was part of was the weakest in that area, and he was the least in his father's house. So you can see the picture of almost a nobody, you know, a nobody being called into this great mission. It must be skeptical, and Gideon was skeptical about this call. You can imagine God just saying to you, listen, you are going to go out and you are going to set the people free. I'm sure that you and I would have also been very skeptical about this call. So what does Gideon do? He respectfully asked for a sign, something miraculous. So from the offset, I just want to state that, and I've highlighted it in bold, this should not be taken as a lack of faith, and I'll tell you why. Let's look at Deuteronomy 18 verse 21. And if you say in your heart, how shall we know that the word which the Lord has not spoken? when a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not happen or come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You shall not be afraid of him. So in Deuteronomy, in that passage, it was said that a prophet could ask for a sign to show the authenticity. So Gideon was just asking God for a sign. It was not seen as he didn't have faith. He just wanted the confirmation. So Gideon prepared an offering on a rock, and an angel caused fire to consume it. So here a miracle happens, and Gideon sees that surely this must be God speaking to me. My faith is reassured. I believe in this voice that I've heard. And that we can read in Judges 6, verse 19 to 22. So Gideon was called to initial obedience because the words from the angel were strong words, is you will go and you will do. So Gideon needed to be in complete obedience. Gideon was first told, as his obedience mission started, to go and destroy the altar to the pagan gods and the goddesses in the area. Now imagine this, how difficult it must have been, because these altars to the pagan gods and goddesses were built by his own father. So just imagine that internal battle. God spoke to you, God gave you an instruction. He says, you are a mighty man of valor. You are going to go out and you are going to save the Israelites from the Midianites. And now your very first mission is to go tear down some pagan worship altars that your father has built. I'm sure that this must have taken great courage. And remember what God told him. Remember, God gave him a big picture of setting the people free. So that is a very big mission. To start off with pagan worship altars is something smaller. And that is really significant because isn't it great that obedience starts? Here's another lesson to life. Obedience starts with something small, and when you can be trusted with something small, bigger things can be added to you. Amen? So, Judges 6 verse 25 to 30, the pagan altars are destroyed. So he completes the mission, he's obedient in the mission, pulls them down, they are all destroyed. So everyone came down from the town the next morning and thought, listen, who did this? This is a problem. Our places of worship is gone. So they knew, or someone said that it was Gideon. And they immediately wanted to kill him because their places of worship was destroyed. But let's have a look at this. His own father stood for him. Verse 31. But Joash, his father, said to all who stood against him, would you plead for Baal? Would you save him? Let the one who plead for him be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him speak for him. Let him plead for himself, because his altar has been torn down. Therefore, on that day he called him Jerubbaal, saying, let Baal plead against him, because he has torn down his altar. Clever. Instead of destroying him, they were saying, listen, your God that you are worshipping, surely he is mighty and he can fight for himself. So do not fight his battle, lest you be put to death. So his own father came up and stood up for him and caused the people not to kill and destroy him. Powerful. So let's look at Judges 6 verse 25 to 40. So now, remember what I said, that the Midianites would come in at harvest time, and they would come in and they would take all the spoils of the Israelites. So in verse 34, but the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. Then he blew the trumpet, and the Israelites gathered behind him, and he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who also gathered behind him. He also sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, and they came to meet with him. So 4 other areas, tribes, came and met with him. So Gideon had begun to experience God's protection and his spirit stirring within him. So God sent him on a mission. God gave him clear instruction. So like most of us, we would need reassurance. So why wasn't this as a presumptuous sin? Putting God to the test that the Bible forbids. Remember Deuteronomy 6 verse 16, it reads, "You shall not tempt the Lord your God as you tempted him in Massa." So the difference between reassurance asked by Gideon and testing or tempting the Lord your God is, the difference was that Gideon asked God in faith. He already had faith, humbly seeking reassurance. He wanted God to reaffirm that the plan is in action, God is behind him, God is fighting for him. The generation that had tested God earlier demanded, look at that word, demanded. They placed a demand on God that he prove himself, and demanded it because they did not believe, not because they wanted reassurance. So it's not a problem asking God for reassurance, but it is birthed out of a place of faith. I have faith. I have faith. Therefore, God, I need the reassurance. Can you see that? It's powerful. So as you see in that picture, the reassurance that Gideon asked for, and you can read that in Judges, is he said to God, I am going to put out a fleece at night, and when the morning comes, there will be dew only on the ground, not on the fleece. So then that happened. And then he said, God, do not be angry. Can I ask you for another sign, reassurance, just to reverse the sign? So in other words, put out the fleece. The next morning, there will be only dew on the fleece and nothing on the ground. So let's look at Gideon's victory. So now he had been prepared by God for a stunning act of obedience. This is where it gets really powerful. So remember, when he blew the trumpet, 4 tribes were summoned in the area to Gideon. So these people came down to support Gideon. So he must have felt not just reassured by what God had reassured him, but surely the men is behind him. Surely I'm going to go in the battle with 32,000 men. So look at what happens next. God speaks to Gideon and he tells him that the number was too great, the number of 32,000 men, because the victory must be seen to be the Lord's. So if the men just overpower and win, they will have pride in themselves, and they would see the victory to be of themselves, and they would boast of themselves. So God wanted it to be clear that the victory is his. So Gideon he was very clever. He just went to 32,000 men and he said to them, whoever of you is fearful, you may leave. And look at this. 22,000 men left. 22,000. And only 10,000 remained. So surely as the numbers must have gotten less, the reassurance or the struggle within Gideon must have increased again, because it's less men to fight the Midianites, which is a mighty army. So then what does God do? God tells Gideon again that the amount of 10,000 is still too much. So in Judges 7 verse 4 to 8, you can read of what happens next. So God says, as you can see in the picture, he says, as your men, Gideon, passes through the river, each man who bows down to his knees and takes water up, those men will depart. But the man who walks through the river without stopping and just takes a scoop with their hands and drink on their journey will be the guys or the army members who remain. Powerful. And then only 300 men remained. And that's the 300 men that Gideon took to the victory. So imagine going through reassurance, God saying that you are going to defeat the Midianites, you're going to set Israel free. And then after reassurance, you only get to a place where there's 300 men, 300, and you're going to defeat this army. But Gideon stuck. He stuck to what he had already perceived in his spirit and in his heart, that what God said to him. So he didn't need further reassurance. This is wow. I can tell you honestly that if I was in that position, I would have asked God again to give me reassurance or to give me a sign, because I'm pretty sure that 300 men and I wouldn't win. So it's significant. And that's why the story is so powerful. We have so much to learn from this. So God provided reassurance anyway. How powerful is that? Gideon didn't ask him for another sign or reassurance. God provided it anyway. And we can read this in Judges 7 verse 13. And when Gideon had come, there was a man telling a dream. So just quickly, Gideon and his servant went down secretly into the camp, and this is what they overheard. And when Gideon had come, there was a man telling a dream to his companion. He said, I have had a dream. To my surprise, a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian. It came to a tent and struck it, so that it fell and overturned, and the tent collapsed. Then his companion answered and said, now this is interpretation of the dream. This is nothing else but the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand God has delivered Midian and the whole camp. How powerful is that? The enemy confirms the victory that Gideon is going to lead, be the leader of. How powerful is that? Sure, it was part of God's plan. So there is a picture of the actual battle. This is part of the story that most of you would know, is Gideon's men, these 300 men, and this is also significant. They had a trumpet in the one hand. So all of you know we only have two hands. They had a trumpet in the one hand, and they had a torch, called a torch, which they hid away before they went in. So the one hand had a trumpet and the other one had a lamp, a torch. So just by the look of this, if there's a trumpet in this hand and a lamp in this hand, then surely I can't hold my sword. There's no place to hold my sword. So this is very significant, because the victory was clear. They had clarity about the victory. They had faith in the victory. Because if you were fearful, you would still be drawn to your sword, because that is physical protection. That's powerful. So they all made a great noise, blew the trumpet, and brought the torches out. And this caused confusion in the camp of the Midianites. So what happened? They turned on themselves within the camp. They turned on themselves, swords and everything. There was confusion in the camp, and there was a great victory that only a few of the Midianite armies were left, and they were on foot. They were running away, and the rest of Israel. It's powerful. You can read this in the scripture. Is the rest, not only the 300, but the rest of the camp, the people that were encamped, ready to go with Gideon, chased after the Midianites, and all of them were slain. Powerful, powerful. So let's look at the aftermath. So Gideon was a great judge in that time who really set the people free. But let's look at this. The power of the enemy was completely broken. Gideon himself executed their leaders. Now, there is also a very strong, it's a very strong part of a leader to go and kill the leaders. Customary in that time, if you had sent someone else in, it just looks different to the men. So Gideon by himself going and executing their leaders just reaffirmed his leadership within Israel. So in Judges 8 verses 1 to 3, you can see how Gideon dealt with jealousy and resentment in a wise and humbled way. And then also when the Israelites came to him and said to him, please, you can rule as king on the throne, he rejected the throne. Judges 8 verse 23. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Powerful, powerful. It was an easy place. Think of this. It's an easy place to just take up the throne, go sit on the throne, rule from the throne. But Gideon had known that it was not his place, but that the God of heaven's armies, the Lord will rule over them. It's powerful. So let's just look at this. Gideon, great man, a nobody. God gave a mission, fulfilled his mission, had great faith. He was successful. The success also corrupted him in two ways. Let's look at the first one. First, he made a golden ephod. So I included a picture there just to give you an idea of an ephod. An ephod is a priestly garment. And this garment is supposed to be for the priests. Let's look at Judges 8 verse 27. Then Gideon made it into an ephod and set it up in the city of Ophrah. And all of Israel displayed the harlot with it there. So it became a snare to Gideon and his house. So firstly, an ephod is a priestly garment. It is meant for the priest. So it's meant only for the generation or the line of Aaron, the priest, so the Levites. And also the second thing, he left it in Ophrah. And the ephod, the priestly garment, is always supposed to be left at the tabernacle. So part of the rules and regulations of the tabernacle and the priestly given in earlier books in the Old Testament was broken. Therefore, he did not follow the ways of priestly worship. And it says clearly in the word, in verse 27, it became a snare to Gideon and his house. The second thing is, even though Gideon refused to be king. That word, sorry, there's a spelling mistake there. He refused of a kind. Sorry, my apology for that bad grammar. He refused the throne to be king, but he viewed himself as a leader. And why do we say that? If we look at Gideon, one of his sons' name was Abimelech. And what does Abimelech mean? Abi means my father, and Melech means is king. My father is king. So that is one of the mistakes he made. Yet, during Gideon's lifetime, his area that he was in of Israel worshipped the Lord. Powerful. So, two things corrupted him. He was still God's man. And in his time of rule, the Israelites still worshipped God. Okay, so powerful. Before we get to a summary or lessons to life, let's just continue and look at the life of Samson. Now, this is in Judges 13 verse 1 to 16 verse 31. Let's look at the setting. You can see here that the setting is exactly the same. Is Judges 13 verse 1. Again, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them in the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. It starts exactly the same as it started with Gideon. The Israelites were disobedient, they did evil, and they were delivered to someone else. So they were oppressed. So this is coming out of the period of Jephthah. So unlike Jephthah, Samson began his life with every advantage. Every advantage. Let's look at this. His birth was announced by an angel. He was given a godly upbringing by his loving parents. He was set apart to God from his early childhood. Now look at this. This is very powerful, and this is something that we will discuss in the fall of Samson. He was to live under the most special of all Old Testament vows, that of a Nazirite. And this, to live under a Nazirite rule, was not a decision taken by his parents. It was declared by the angel that it will be the way of living for Samson. So that you can read in Numbers 6. A Nazirite is the following: an Israelite who was consecrated to the service of God under vows to abstain from alcohol, let the hair grow. We all know the story of the hair, and avoid defilement by contact with dead bodies. So in number 6, you will read a lot more. This is just in summary to give you an idea of what a Nazirite is. Let's look at Judges 13 verse 24. So the woman bore a son and called his name Samson. And the child grew and the Lord blessed him. The child grew and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him. It began to move upon him. So God had blessed him, God blessed him, and he had a spiritual advantage. He was the word that says, we have been blessed with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places. Samson was blessed and he had a spiritual advantage. These events give us an indication of a strong leader or judge that would be great, that would be a great benefit to all of Israel. Just think about it. Someone that was brought up, was declared to be brought up, kept apart, set apart for God, live under a Nazirite rule. He was from a small age, he was blessed by God. The Spirit of the Lord moved upon him. He was set up for a specific mission. And you would think that the strong leader would have achieved much. Unfortunately, this was not the case. Sorry, my screen is just frozen here for a while. Let me just... Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Looking at Samson's failures. Number 1, Samson was dominated by sensual desire. Like all of us, fleshly desires will fail us. So his passion led him to desire a Philistine woman as a wife. Now, there's not just a problem with sensual desire here. In that time, as the law that God gave to the Israelites, he was strictly forbidden to marry any other tribe, and especially the Philistines. And this passion also led him to liaisons with prostitutes. Let's look at the scripture, Judges 14 verse 1. Now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. So he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore, get her for me as a wife. He goes and he gives an instruction, I want her as my wife. Not considering, not thinking about God's forbidden law, about intermarriages and other tribes. He just wanted her as wife. Then his father and his mother said to him, is there no woman among the daughters of your brethren or among my people that you must go and get a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? It is strictly forbidden. And Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she pleases me well. But his father and mother did not know that it was of the Lord, that he was seeking an occasion to move against the Philistines. For at the time, the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So we also see here, except for his desire, essential desire, God also had a plan because he needed to move up against the Philistines because they were ruling and they had complete rulership over the Israelites. Here we also see another example, Judges 16 verse 1. Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there and went into her. So you all understand what that means. A harlot is another word for a prostitute. So let's just look at Samson's power. This was an amazing guy. So on his way to meet with this Philistine woman he was going to marry. Judges 14 verse 5. Now to his surprise, a young lion came roaring against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he tore the lion apart as one would have torn apart a young goat, though he had nothing in his hand. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. Powerful. The Spirit of the Lord was working mightily upon him. And if you read further, you will see he went to his wife, and then on returning to her, he saw the same lion on the side of the road, and it was filled with bees and honey. And he actually took from this honey, and he was eating of this honey, which later then became part of a riddle that he gave to this wife and to the Philistines, which they got irritated about. We'll have a look at that now. Let's look at Samson's failure further. It was Delilah who finally betrayed him and brought an end to his reign. Judges 16 verse 4. After it happened that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah, and the lords of the Philistine came up to her and said to her, entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him and afflict him. And every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Look at this, a Philistine woman who was also a harlot, and she was going to betray him for mere pieces of silver. Let's look at Samson's anger. So when he had given the riddle to his Philistine wife, they couldn't solve the riddle, and he said to them, if you can solve the riddle, then I will give you 30 pieces of garment and clothing. So his wife enticed him, and eventually he told her, and she went to tell the people, and they answered him. So he lost the bet, in other words. Look at what happened. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of their men, took their apparel, and gave the changes of clothing to those who explained the riddle. So his anger was aroused, and he went back up to his father's house, and Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best friend. So he had left, and his wife was given to another man. So just skipping onto that story, when he came back and he wanted to go into the room with her, the father of his wife said, no, there's no ways you can do this, because I had given her to your best friend. So he was so angered, he was so angry. In Judges 15 verse 4, then Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches, turned the fox's tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. When he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and he burned up both the shocks and standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. Crazy. So what happens next is they wanted to know who had done this. Why is all our grains burnt up? So they knew it was Samson, so they went to his wife and their father, and they burnt them alive. Crazy. Let's look further. Point number 2 on Samson's failures. Samson was motivated by pride and the passion for revenge. He was more motivated by anger at personal affronts to strike out at the Philistines than he was moved by the suffering people he was supposed to lead. Remember, this mighty man that God had moved on, God had stirred him, the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. There was no inbound routes, plans to set the Israelites free. This man, because he was powerful, because he was mighty, was caught up in his own pride. And he did not think about the people, the suffering people. He was only moved towards his own personal anger. And that's why he wanted to fight with the Philistines. He wanted to have revenge on the Philistines. He wanted to kill the Philistines. But none of that had a plan to set the people free. Let's look at Judges 15 verse 7. Samson said to them, since you would not do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you. And after that I will cease. So he attacked them hip and thigh with great slaughter. And then he went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock at Etham. Let's look at Judges 15 verse 14. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting out against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burnt with fire, and his the bonds broke loose from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and killed 1,000 men with it. At this stage, he was going to give himself over, because the people had said, you're going to cause us trouble. Why have you done this? So he said, okay, don't kill me yourselves. Hand me over to them. And then what does he do? He kills them with a jawbone, 1,000 of them. Let's look at point number 3. Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistine. This is a very long period. Samson, unlike the other judges who gave their generations rest from their enemies, never threw off the enemy yoke. During his rule, the Philistines still dominated Israel. So if you look back at the life of Gideon, you would see that God moved mighty upon his life. Also, God called him. God didn't call him from birth like he did with Samson, but he set his people free. In the time of Samson, the people were still oppressed by the Philistines. Can you see the difference in the two judges? Okay, Samson was still God's man, powerful. Then he became very thirsty. This is after he fought with all the people, killed them. So he cried out to the Lord and said, You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant. And now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? So God split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank, and his spirit returned, and he was revived. So God was still looking after his man, even after Delilah had given him over to the Philistines. He was in change. He was given over. They were making a mockery of him. He needed to do funny things while they were all the princes, every one of the Philistines were at a banquet gathering together. Remember, his eyes were also plucked out. His strength was removed. Let's look at Judges 16 verse 28. Then Samson called to the Lord, saying, O Lord God, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, just this once, O God, that I may with this blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars which supported the temple, and he braced himself against them, one on his right and the other one on his left. Then Samson said, Let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all his might, and the temple fell on the lords and all the people who were in it. So the dead that he killed at his death was more than he killed in his life. So you can imagine how many Philistines came to die when God gave him power one last time. Powerful. God still had a plan as a lot of the Philistine leaders were taking out in this. In closing on the judges, and this image you have seen before, the cycle of sin and deliverance in the book of Judges. We start with the Israelites' sin against the Lord. Then God removes his hand on the Israelites. The Israelites are afflicted by their enemies. Then the Israelites cry out, like naughty children cry out to the Lord for deliverance. And then point number 4, the Lord raises up judges who deliver the Israelites from their enemies. This is the continuation. One would think it would come to an end, but it didn't. Okay, so I want to encourage you, and I trust you will understand this. When we read the Bible and we have a love for the Word, and that is what we want to do with Power Hour, we want to create and establish a love for the Word. So it's not just a story that we read, it is lessons to life that we can take from this. So from these 2 judges, Gideon and Samson, there's a lot to learn. And there are not just these 10 points, there's many points, but I just want to go through them very quickly so that we can know how powerful the Lord is in the Word, how powerful the Word is, how it can move in our lives, and what it can teach us, even if it is a story. So number 1, skepticism is the enemy of spirituality. Remember, Gideon was skeptic there was a skepticism from the call of God. God said, you're a mighty man of valor. You are going to save the Israelites. You are going to defeat the Midianites. You know, if we are skeptic about something, it can cause our spirit life to suffer. And that's why when we hear of God and we hear from the Spirit, we hear from the Word, we must respond to it by faith. Point number 2, humble and insignificant people can have a vital role in God's plan. I love it. If you look at David, David was a little shepherd boy, and God called him, and he was a mighty man, defeated Goliath. So we must never think of ourselves as God cannot use us, because in this, surely all of us can see we must just respond to the call of God. Point number 3, believers can obtain reassurance from God. We are allowed as believers, as sons and daughters of God, to ask reassurance. But remember, reassurance from God is in His Word. It's in the Spirit. Where do I get reassurance? I read the Word. It reaffirms what God is saying to me. When I pray, I get there's reassurance from the Spirit, what I'm hearing of God. So reassurance, we get reassurance from God. We can, but it moves out of a place of faith. Obedience in small ways can qualify us for larger ministries. Remember, Gideon started with something small, and because he could be trusted with something small, he could move on to bigger things. Point number 5, faith in God can bring great victories. Great victories. When we have faith in God, can bring great victories. Look at the life of Gideon. Point number 6, success can hold dangers for the believer. We've seen this in Gideon. We've seen this in Samson. Success, we must always stay humble. Success is the Lord's. Victory is the Lord's. We must never be in a place of pride in ourselves, and we must always stay humble, because there is a snare. There can be a snare in success. Point number 7, when God is on our side, numbers are meaningless. Look at that, 300 people defeating thousands of Midianites. God was on the side of Samson. He defeated 1,000 with a jaw in his hand. Point number 8, reminding ourselves of the original calling can keep us safe. How powerful is that? The original calling. What is the original calling? Sometimes we move away from the original calling. But when we think about it and we reaffirm it in our lives again, then we are safe. We are under covering. Not like the Israelites. They were in the original calling and then they move out. Original calling, move out. Oppression, oppression, oppression. See, that is a valid lesson that we can learn in life. Point number 9. The flesh can deceive us, but the Spirit brings clarity. Look at Samson. The fleshly desires can deceive us, but the Spirit brings such a clarity. Even if there are desires in the flesh, the Spirit will calm those down. It will bring clarity, and there will be a shift from flesh into Spirit to say, no, this is not what I must be busy with. This is not the calling. This is not what I must be busy with. And the last one, following our own rules can lead us to a fall. Look at some of the own rules that Gideon made. It was a snare for him. It was a snare for the Israelites. So we must be very careful to move away from the plans, the rules, the guidelines that God sends for us. It is very dangerous when we move out of them. So in closing, we have a lot to learn from these judges. And I trust tonight, through our study in the Bible, through our study of the judges, you can see that it's not just the story of the Old Testament of the Israelites, but there are lessons to life that we can apply. And that is why we are here on a Thursday night, is we need to learn. We need to learn from the Word so that we can get stuck into it. We can take it in. We can live it out. And we can also spread the news of what we learn as we love the Word more. I trust that this has really encouraged you and uplifted you this evening. So, Uncle Olwyn, I'm going to give over to you at this point. And thank you very much.
Krista, thank you very much. That was very, very good. I liked the summation on the lessons of life, and that's something I think that we can really take take a lot from. Has anyone got any questions that they wish to raise? Anything that you want to talk to Krista about or ask him a question? So just raise your hand and we'll give you the opportunity to ask the question. Anybody got any questions? You're very quiet tonight. Yeah, Krista, it's amazing. It's amazing when you look at the life of both these men. That the one was insignificant, like Gideon, threshing the wheat in the winepress, and then God calls him, and he becomes great. And the other one is predestined already from birth that he will be great. But yet both of them. So it's two different paradigms. You have one that is a nobody that becomes a somebody, and you have a somebody that eventually becomes a nobody. But in death, he gets the victory by killing all the leaders of the Philistines. If he said he killed 10,000 here, he killed 1,000 with the jawbone. He killed a whole bunch of people. Yet by just pushing the columns of the temple down, he killed more people than he killed before. So it just shows you how many people were there. We've been in Israel and we've seen the columns of those temples. I mean, those are big pieces of stone. And you think they were loaded on top of each other, and then you've got the roof on top of that. So it must have taken a supernatural impartation of the Holy Spirit for him to be able to move those blocks, because you cannot physically, naturally, it's impossible.
Yeah.
But with one hand on each column to push it just shows you that the power, when the power of the Holy Spirit comes on you, what you can actually achieve. Yeah. Has anyone got any questions? You're all very quiet tonight. You're all satisfied. It's just not a fairy story or a children's tale that we discussed this evening. They are real truths, and they are real lessons that we need to learn from this. Somebody unmuted.
If I have a question.
Yes, Jared.
It's myself. Hi, sir. I would just like to know, during Gideon's lifetime, right, the land had peace for 40 years. I just want to know, is that part of the topic? Can I ask that question? What was the reason that the land had peace for 40 years? Was it because of his death, or?
You asked?
Yeah, just ask the question again. You said something about the land for 40 years.
I apologize. Yeah, so the land had peace for 40 years.
Yeah, because what happened? Okay, Krista, the question voted. The question is that with Gideon that there was 40 years of peace after he done what he did. Can you explain the reason for the peace?
Yeah, look, the 40 years that was discussed tonight is the period which Gideon judged. So his span of judging Israel was 40 years. So from beginning to end, I'm not 100% sure from the victory, but I would say from the land. From the time of victory up until the time where the next judge ruled was approximately 40 years. And in those 40 years, Israel worshipped God. So they were not in a oppressed state because they were wicked in their ways, worshipping other gods. They were living under the hand and the protection of God. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%.
So at the end of those 40 years, of those 40 years, there was another judge. So at the end of that 40 years, Israel became oppressed again because they turned away from God. They turned away from worshiping Him, and they worshiped other gods again, and all the other sin that goes with it. And then another judge was then brought in by God. Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Jared?
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Sir. Anyone else have any questions? Anything that they want to ask Christo?
I think I'm going to call myself Christo from now
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of him. Sorry, Wouter. I apologize. But you see, Wouter, just go back to that slide of the cycle of sin.
Okay.
You see, like what that has been covered in the last two sessions that we had, that this cycle of sin and defeat is a constant process of Israel at that time. So if you look at it in terms of they sin against the Lord, then the enemy comes and they are afflicted because God's hand is removed from them. Remember what was said in Judges chapter 3, which I shared on 2 weeks ago, that God kept the Philistines and the Amalekites, kept them as a thorn in the side or in the flesh of the Israelites. So they get oppressed. They start to call out on God. Number 3, they call out on God. Then God raises a judge, and the people are delivered and set free. And then there is a time of peace, like we had this evening, 40 years. And then they go back to the cycle. So that cycle just goes around and around and around. And they just never seem to learn the lesson. And every time God has to step in and deliver them again. And that's one of the things that we as the people of God need to be careful of, that this cycle of defeat and decline is not part of our lives. That somewhere we need to break the chain. That once we get to number 3, we cry to Lord, and number 4, where we are saved and delivered, that we stay saved and delivered and we stay obedient, and we don't do like Gideon did this evening, where he made himself a king, and he thought he was just the main person, like Samson thought that he was just the main guy as well. But eventually, through both of them, their sin brought again a time of oppression and conflict, both with the people that were oppressing them, but also a separation from God. So that's really what we need to be careful of. Yeah. Well, I don't see any other questions. If there isn't anyone else, then I just want to say to you, Wouter, thank you very much. It was very good tonight. Thank you for your preparation. It was excellent. Thank you guys for joining us. May you be blessed. Remember, next week, we are going to do a final wrap on Judges. I think Christo is going to be doing that. And we look forward to that. He's in Zambia at the moment, doing some work, so that's why he's not with us. But be blessed. May you guys just have a great week, and may the Lord really just out of this message this evening, that may God just bring revelation and understanding to us all. So thank you very much, Wouter. Thank you, everyone else.